In the 4 years he was governor, he was able to have a significant impact on the state of New Jersey, greater than that of many people who served much longer. Whether or not people agreed with him, New Jerseyans respect Governor Florio's depth and breadth of knowledge and his deep commitment, his profoundly deep commitment to bettering the state through carefully crafted public policy. No one can doubt his commitment to finding workable solutions to some of the most complex problems that we face. He received the 1993 John F. Kennedy Profile in Courage Award, created by the Kennedy family to honor the best public servants. Governor Florio was recognized, and I'm quoting here, for his courageous political leadership in gun control, education, and economic reform. Today, he is of counsel to the law firm of Florio, Perucci, Steinhardt, and Fader, and teaches here, has been teaching here for many years at Rutgers University at the Blaustein School. He's been a frequent visitor in this room and always a valuable contributor to our programs. I'm very pleased to welcome back Governor Jim Florio.
Thank you very much. You are very kind. Thank you all very much. Let me first of all thank Ruth and Eagleton for not only hosting today, but for being very much involved in this whole project that you are all supporting. And I want to thank you all, particularly the organizers of today, and I want to single out David Scanlon. David has been kind of the spark plug for much of the work that we have to do to get us all together and to have this initiative be successful. I want to also thank all of you for your presence here today, but perhaps as important as anything else, for your support for this initiative that Ruth alluded to and that I'm very proud to be associated with. As she stated, this is going to be a think tank of sorts that's going to try to focus on the role of the governors of New Jersey at the outset, but I have no doubts that at some point this will be a national repository of wisdom about the role of the governors of the United States of America. And I think, just as an aside, the role of the governors is increasingly important as the problems that we face in this country are becoming more and more complex, more complicated. The governors, and all deference to Alan, the legislators are starting to take a place secondary in importance to the executives, whether it be presidents, governors, mayors, largely because of the need for a higher degree of efficiency in dealing with problems. That is just something that lends itself towards power gravitating towards the governor, for the good or for the bad. But the politics of the gubernatorial significance are starting to play out. This initiative that we're talking about is focusing obviously on my administration. The other governors of the state, the recent governors of the state, are doing the same type of thing. And the hope is that we will have this repository of information so that academic folks can come and do research and so on. But as was mentioned, I didn't want it just to be about research. I just didn't want it to be just about nostalgia. I mean, after a while, too much nostalgia indicates senility, and I don't want that to happen. So what we're trying to do is to make this sort of a living institution. And it's the plan to have forums, seminars, and things of that sort about contemporary issues, particularly as they relate to the principles of governance that we tried to put into effect when I was in office. And I think that's a need for that. Just as an aside, we are really working very hard to focus on a couple of problems. We're going to talk a little bit today, briefly, about the assault weapon ban, because I want to use that as an example of something we're going to try and do in this thing. And that's particularly timely because the progress that a lot of us thought we made in terms of restricting access to firearms under the radar is being slowly but surely shredded. I don't know if you've been following it, but under the leadership of some of the more recently conservative governors around the state, around the nation, laws are being changed such that 2 states just approved laws to allow firearms on campuses. The rationale, which is mind-boggling, is that if everybody's armed, we're all safer. I regard that as sort of ludicrous, but the fact of the matter is no one's paying attention to these things that are going on. Just as an interesting aside, and Patrick and I have talked about the workings of Congress, the House of Representatives just within the last 2 weeks had the opportunity to pass a bill that would restrict the sale of firearms to people who are on the national terrorist list. The bill failed. So now we have a situation in this country where people on the national terrorist list are legally able to go and buy weapons. So what we want to do is conduct forums and seminars about contemporary issues as they relate to things that we've done, how things have changed, or in some cases, how things have not changed. And I think that's something that's very important. And that's compatible with my philosophy, which I think most of you in this room share, that citizenship is about being active. Citizenship is about being engaged and informed. And if, in fact, you're engaged and informed, you can be a truly good citizen. Engaged in terms of being involved in the process. At a minimum, registering and voting, but also being informed. And being informed about the substance of the policies that we're all working through in the appropriate forums to try to make sure that we have good policies that allow us all to be able to live good and productive lives. What I'd like to do is just take a minute to outline an issue that I think is a wonderful example of people generally, to the general population, becoming engaged and becoming informed and having a difference. And I'm talking about the assault weapon ban issue that many of you can remember. I know Russ was very much involved in that issue, as was many of you as well. And this entailed the decision that I made about 3 months into office that stated that we were going to have sort of the cutting edge position on this issue, saying that there really was no need and the public interest not being served by having access to military assault weapons. We were going to pass a law banning the possession and sale of military assault weapons in this state. And as you can appreciate, the fact, very controversial, strong lobby, the gun lobby, NRA, oppose it. But with the help of a supportive legislature, we were able to get that bill passed. President Clinton was very, very kind in saying this was what he wanted to do, and subsequently did the same type of thing at the national level. Unfortunately, it's expired, and it hasn't been renewed at the national level. But it still remains the law in New Jersey. And the key issue that goes to this point of involvement and engagement on the part of citizens was that in 1991, a new legislature was elected, and it was not a supportive legislature. As a matter of fact, it was a legislature that was largely financed by the NRA and came in committed to undoing the law that we had passed. They got elected, and frankly, and they had veto-proof majorities. They got elected and very quickly passed laws repealing our ban on assault weapons. The test then became whether, when I vetoed that bill, the test became whether we could override the veto. The Assembly was very clever in giving no notice and in the middle of the night passing an override of my veto. But then the Senate announced that they would be in 3 weeks having a vote as well. And this is where this whole concept came into play. We mounted, and this is one of the things I'm most proud of in my administration, we mounted a positively devastating campaign to inform citizens in the state about what was taking place. We organized people almost to the teeth. We went out and we had teachers organized to come work very hard. We had, unfortunately, a young student shot in Paterson that at this time enabled us to even more forcefully mobilize the awareness of the problem of these weapons, which serve no purpose. I mean, you don't hunt with an Uzi or an AK-47. These are weapons of destruction. So we had the teachers going. We had the medical community very much involved. We had physicians in Newark who were telling and testified before events that we held about the destructive wounds that they had to deal with on a Saturday night in our urban areas. We had the Defense Department come and tell us that they sent military doctors to hospitals in Newark to learn how to treat military wounds as a result of things that were going on in there. We had the law enforcement community, the people who are on the front lines of this, come and testify and tell us how they were threatened. I remember the prosecutor in Camden County, Sam Asbell was his name, came and told me that he couldn't send law enforcement officials into North Camden at night because the bad guys had more firepower than the good guys did. And that was very meaningful to me. And then, of course, we had the clergy organize, lifting this to the level of being a moral issue, which it was. Well, as a result of all of this hard work, getting people engaged in understanding what was going on and informed about whether it was for the good of the people of the state that we needed to have more assault weapons available to people, we were able to go and change the whole tenor of the climate and the conversation. The week before the vote in the Senate, the Eagleton poll came out and indicated that 77% of the people of New Jersey felt that overriding my veto was a bad idea. And I guess the good news is that when it came time to vote in the Senate, not a single senator voted to override my veto. A lot of them abstained, but no individual. And it was really a wonderful example. And in some respects, a case study for what can happen when people become engaged and informed to achieve the public interest, even in the face of strong special interest opposition, in this case, the NRA. Well, that's really what we're trying to do, trying to focus on policy. And that's an easy lead-in to Patrick Kennedy, because Patrick Kennedy's himself, as well as his family tradition, has been engaged in public policy in very forceful ways. I don't even have to go into the area of their support for the efforts that we try to become involved with in terms of gun violence, that they've always been very, very supportive, and I was very appreciative, obviously, to receive the award that was given to me for what we did on the whole assault weapon ban. Patrick, someone that we now have, as some of you may not know, is now a resident of New Jersey. Patrick and I had the experience of sitting through a very interesting but very long dinner not too long ago. And we got an opportunity to talk, and I shared with him that his family has always been an inspiration for me. Obviously, the whole nation was inspired by President Kennedy. But I mentioned to him that I was particularly inspired by Robert Kennedy. Senator Kennedy came to Camden, New Jersey in 1968. He spoke at the Armory, which has since been demolished, but in a racially mixed crowd, was just so inspiring. I almost had a spiritual feeling. The serenity that he conveyed at that troubled time was really something that really moved me as a young man who was contemplating going into public office or running for public office. That moved me to the point of it said, I made up my mind at that event that you could do some good things in public office, and decided to do that. And of course, Patrick's father, Ted Kennedy, Senator Ted Kennedy, was somebody I worked with very closely in Washington when we both served in the Congress, particularly working closely on upgrading and revising the Clean Air Act, because the senator was interested in that, and I was interested in environmental matters as well. And of course, Patrick himself has now carved out an area of expertise that he is known for dealing with mental health problems, behavioral health problems, and I'm going to ask him in his remarks to say a few words about his newest initiative. I saw him on television not too long ago on CNN explaining this new initiative he's launching. I think he called it the Moonshot for the Mind. A very, very important thing that he has the expertise to be able to put forward and to be in a position to move us in a direction that this nation really longs for. So it's a very, very great pleasure for me to be able to present to you Patrick Kennedy, a good friend and someone who is fully in the tradition of his family, of which he can be very proud.
Thank you very much, Governor. I have to say, in my life, I was honored just to be born into the family I was born into and have this great family legacy. And it paved the way for me in politics. You know, I often say that in the third grade, I was taught to go to school and promise the teacher a living wage. And in the 6th grade, my homework assignment was when the Iowa caucuses and New Hampshire primaries were. I had this great name that was just given to me by dint of birth. But the legacy of my uncle and the legacy of my family and the finest tradition of public service in this country is lived out every day by people who are moved by it and moved into action by it. And there's a reason Governor Florio occupies the hallowed pages of the Profiles in Courage Award. Because he is one of those people who didn't just talk a good game, he was about action. And when my Uncle Bobby gave that famous speech in Cape Town, South Africa, about each time a person stands up or acts to improve the lot of others, they send forth a tiny ripple of hope, and coming from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples can create a current that can knock down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. He was saying it didn't take one person to change the events of history, but it took each of us doing our part. And when the governor just talked to you about what it took to override that veto, making sure that it was ultimately rejected, he was talking about instilling that sense of action amongst the citizenry of New Jersey in order for a better and more enlightened public policy. He was trying to be the instrument of what my Uncle Bobby spoke about and trying to get more people to participate in their government, and just as my uncle did in his inaugural address when he asked his countrymen to give of themselves to their country as opposed to waiting for their country to ask what they could do for them. And Governor Florio's life has been about trying to not only serve himself, but be the vehicle for citizen action. And what a great message that is, especially today. Especially when cynicism pervades in Washington, D.C., when the skeptics have all the airwaves, and when all people's messages are, get out of politics, get out of civic engagement, that's for someone else's job to do. Why is it important that you're here today? Because in instructing young people about the lessons of how he made effective public policy in the wake of powerful interests like the NRA and prevailing, because it was the right thing, it was the moral thing to do, you're instructing a whole new generation of young people to think differently than the Fox Newses want them to think. Because you see, the other side benefits when people get out of the public stream and when they don't participate. Because then what's the vacuum? The vacuum is left for just the powerful special interests to have their say. Governor Florio's message is a message that's important because he was just about talking simple facts and figures and public policy. That's what informed, members changing their votes or abstaining, I should say. And that's what it also informed his doing the right thing by investing in this country, in its environment, in its education, the very things today that are being cut everywhere you look. And I know as a new resident of New Jersey, I'm grateful, even though I never was able to cast my vote for Governor Florio, tonight I am by proxy, by being here tonight. Because I'm going to be the beneficiary of all of you who are part of his administration. Because I'm going to have a family here in New Jersey where I can feel a little bit safer because the beaches are cleaner. If my kids in the future ever want to go play in the beach, my kids are going to breathe a little cleaner air and maybe not have as many asthma attacks as I had growing up. Because he knew that there were a lot of children with asthma out there, as well as seniors who were restricted because of poor air quality. And importantly, as he mentioned, the streets are a little bit safer. And that is an important legacy. Now, people can say, well, that's not going to get rid of the weapons, and oh, that's one state law. And All I know is if it saves one life, that's the most noble thing he could ever claim credit for. And as the governor pointed out, it not only saves those lives that are taken because of senseless gun violence, because of the easy availability of guns, it saves their whole families. What people don't count when they look at these statistics are the family members for the rest of their lives who are scarred because of this gun violence. I grew up with cousins who never had a father because of gun violence. They're not in the statistics, but their lives have been transformed because of senseless violence, because it used to be possible that you could order guns online, and it's still, but for the fact that here in New Jersey, it's just a little bit more difficult. And thank God I live in New Jersey because of Governor Florio and his legacy. So I told Caroline that I was coming, and she happened to have an extra copy. So I don't know what she carries them around in her suitcase or something. She's got all these books coming out. But I make my own inscription, including to Caroline's. As I begin my new life and new family in New Jersey, I'm grateful for your tremendous legacy, Governor. Good schools, clean beaches, and safer streets. That's something that you should be immensely proud of. I know I am the beneficiary as well as all New Jerseyans, and I'm looking forward to living in a state that's better today because of your service. Thank you, Governor.